Hello and welcome to the AgCulture Podcast, where we share insights about the future of agriculture. Each week, we dive into the stories, technology, and ideas shaping a sustainable and profitable future for farms and rural communities alike. I'm Paul Windemaller, host of the AgCulture Podcast, and today we're going to be talking with Matt Bowes. Now, Matt and I met through a peer group that we're both involved with, a general business peer group, and we're going to be talking a bit today about some of the work that he does as an agricultural consultant, doing peer group facilitation work, as well as his general consulting. Matt is the founder of Agrigrowth Consulting, based out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I've known Matt now for a few years and have really enjoyed having the chance to get to know him and see how his career has really blossomed and changed in the last few years as we've gotten to know each other. So he's going to share a little bit of those insights about his career change, the transitions that he's had, and what he's doing today in his work with farmers across the U.S. So listen up. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation with Matt Bowes. Hey everyone, before we get started with today's episode, I just wanted to take a second to thank our sponsors, Bank Barn. I love these guys and what they're doing to streamline banking in agriculture. They're helping to connect farmers and lenders so that today's farmers have more options no matter the size of operation. Check out bankbarn.io to learn more. Today's episode, we have Matt Bowes, a friend of mine and a fellow companion in business peer group together as well. So we're going to spend today's episode talking about the importance of peer groups. And Matt has a lot of experience with that. And he also has an extensive background in agriculture. So welcome to the show, Matt. It's great to have you here today.
Yeah, Paul, it's been it's great to see your face here today and share some insights and hopefully provide some value to those in the ag space and peel back the curtain on a subject here.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. But before we jump into that, why don't you give us a little background on where you kind of came from and your involvement in agriculture to start?
Yeah, so I grew up in central Nebraska, and didn't really, people ask me like, did you grow up on a farm? I didn't grow up on a farm, but I grew up about as close to agriculture as you could get. My dad was a small town ag banker. And my mom owned a franchise in H&R Block. But I came from my dad's family, grew up in Northeast Kansas on a farm. And, I spent my summers when I was younger on my uncle's farm. And then I spent 9 summers in central Nebraska working for a farm, an irrigated farm and ranch in central Nebraska. So I've always been around agriculture, farms and ranches and those kind of things, and watching them operate. So those summers in central Nebraska chasing around, we ran about 3,600 head of yearlings every summer. So those were some wild summers. They were just a bunch of knucklehead teenagers running around the sandhills of Nebraska, never staying in and, going through fences and all the headaches of that. So that's spent those summers in that, and then a background in got my undergraduate degree at Kansas State in agribusiness, and ended up getting a master's degree at University of Nebraska, an MBA in agribusiness, and then spent the early part of my career really in the chemistry side of the business. So I worked for DuPont for quite a while, Syngenta, and then also had a chance to run an agribusiness in the meantime, in central Nebraska into the Front Range of Colorado. So, been just kind of some diversified insights across a few states.
And then you decided to kind of morph your career from being, working for some of these larger companies to doing more of a consulting role independently. Is that right?
Yeah. And it started a couple of years ago, and, I'd always wanted to do something outside, start my own business, work with the growers that I wanted to work with, those ones that I always enjoyed running across. I worked across 7 different states, and there was always those growers that I came across, and I was like, oh, this is the people I have to spend more time with. And so, yeah, I started working part-time with one farm, really on some strategic and business development, and got to the point where it was like, oh, I can it's time to make the jump and do this full time. So, I've been at it full time for a little over a year, and just out there exploring in the space and really trying to figure out how to drive value to the marketplace and what it wants, and what I thought it might want and what it really wants are different. But it's been a great journey, and it's great to share. Kind of my background of business and agriculture together. So it's really been enjoyable.
Yeah, and we met, what was it, probably right around that time that you were kind of transitioning, and we met through a business peer group, and it's not necessarily agricultural related. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 of us in the whole group that were involved in agriculture, so we kind of found each other very quickly. But we saw value in it. We're both still part of that peer group, and that's what helps our businesses grow. That's what helps us stimulate some growth in our careers and personal lives as well. So why don't you give us some background from your perspective, what value that you've seen for yourself personally being part of a peer group, and then we'll talk more into some of the work you're doing as a facilitator for that.
Yep. So, I kind of got into looking at the peer group space. I was going through this like kind of morphosis, changing, trying to figure things out, listening to podcasts, and and I just didn't have, just like a lot of people, I worked remotely. I didn't have. I lived in a town that I wasn't from. I'm in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, but I was just looking for, like, I needed people around me. I was trying to find those people that could help me on my journey. And so that's what really drove me to looking at a national peer group, is it's like, I just need more people that are farther ahead than me in this journey that I can lean on and take some of their insights and grow a business. So that's what really drew me to it. And so you and I connected right away. I think there's 900 members within our group, but not too many in agriculture. And right away I met a guy in Ohio, and he's like, "Oh, do you know Paul?" He's like, you two talk alike. Like, you need to know each other. So, that's how we connected. Why
don't you go into a little bit more about what your role is today in the groups that you're putting together?
Yeah. So I've got a couple different like peer groups that I've put together. One's just a professional one. And what I've done is I've taken a lot of the insights that I've gained from being in an actual group, like what works, what doesn't work, and taking those and molding those into the world of agriculture, because agriculture is different. It's different than any other business. The big thing about I would say that other businesses just don't understand is the generational aspect to it. Like, I'm working right now with a 7th generation farm and ranch. It's hard for people to understand who aren't in that side of the business what the dynamics are of a 7th generation business. Like, people just like that family operation was formed before the state they're in was in the union. Like, that's crazy to think, So yeah. And then the seasonality of agriculture too. It's just, you've got that there's a cycle to it, and it's not like other businesses. It's some of these huge swings and when we have our time and energy. And, so that's, there's some challenges along with it, but yeah, a lot of it is just bringing those bringing the things that I've learned within our group, what works, what doesn't work, putting those with the people that want to be together and facilitating it. And so that's what I spend a good portion of my time doing.
One thing that I've noticed is it can be kind of a challenge to make the group sticky, and last over a long period of time. Is that something that, I guess in your mind, is that a problem? Is it just for a season? And then if it is a problem, how do you resolve that, or how do you work around that?
Yeah, I think the stickiness comes to there's two parts to this. The stickiness comes in where, like, are you receiving value for it? And a properly facilitated group where everybody is delivering value to each other, that's where the stickiness comes, where you have those conversations that are, you look at them, you're like, oh, that conversation, I can't put a dollar value on that conversation, but that's a $30,000 conversation I just had. And these are not pie in the sky. Like, this is what happened. These conversations really go on within these groups, where somebody provides insight. It says, hey, don't do that. Like, I've done that. Let me help you. Or you're looking at this incorrectly. You can't see your blind spots. Don't do that. You're thinking too small. And it just changes your mind. And sometimes, like, what are those conversations worth, especially over your lifetime? Somebody helping you and really pouring into you. But I'd also say that peer groups, like, I don't think they're for every season. I sometimes, like, you have to be in the mindset to be growing and actively involved. Sometimes we're not, right? Sometimes we're not in that space, and that's fine. If you want to take a step out of it, take a step back and say, hey, I might need to tread water here for a little bit before I get myself really actively engaged.
Yeah. And the value, I guess, that somebody gets out of it, like you were saying, doesn't necessarily have to be a financial value. It might be some other way that person wants to grow in their career, in their personal life. Like, I know, one of the reasons that this podcast exists is because of the peer group that we're both in together. And a couple of guys really encouraged me to do this and share the insights that I've been gaining and share the conversations that I've been having with other people around me to help, build value for others. So that's one thing that I got out of it that doesn't necessarily have a monetary value, but that's been a big impact in my life and hopefully added value in a lot of other people's lives.
Yeah. And it's, the monetary piece is, it's not like we all run around like Scrooge McDuck and like swimming our piles of money. There's people that we're talking about health. We're talking about our health pillars. We're talking about giving back to our communities, being better fathers and better husbands and those kind of things. Like, I've dropped 20 to 30 pounds since I've been involved with the group. Just because I look around and it's like, man, it's tough to grow a business and be a good father and be a good husband and be a leader, walking around this earth 40 pounds overweight. And you look around those other people that are truly successful and you realize, hey, like, I have to make some changes. And you kind of let the group pull you along. Necessarily, it's you say the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So you just want to be around those people that bring your average up.
Right. They're helping to raise the bar in all the areas of your life if that's what you're focusing on, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So why don't you give us in your mind, what are some good tips if somebody's looking for a peer group? Maybe it is revolving around their farm operation and they're looking for a peer group that can help them with their farm operation. What are is there location things that they should be looking at? A time commitment? What type of parameters should somebody be focused on in order to understand what a good peer group could be?
Yeah, so I think there's there's all different levels of what people will call a peer group, from the highest high levels to just a group of small people that you're meeting around. Some of the things that I know that has to happen is you have to have a leader within the group.
Is that a facilitator all the time, or just somebody that's part of the group needs to be the leader? What's that look like?
I would say both, Paul. I think you could put together a group, even if you found some people, both of those things. Somebody has to take the leadership role within that. Agriculture peer groups are inherently tough, I would say, due to the commodity structure, where oftentimes you are truly competing against your neighbor down the road
for land or resources or
exactly.
Yeah, those
exactly.
Things.
And so that doesn't lead well into local peer groups where you can really open up and you can say, hey, this is what I want to do. So yeah, leadership is one. You've got to have some kind of structure, some kind of built-in structure for your calls, for your meetings, where it's a set structure every time. Somebody is managing the time. Somebody is managing the input from others. So you don't have somebody, one member that is hogging all the time, somebody that's going to move that and facilitate that along. And then I think the third one is you have to have buy-in. You have to have monetary buy-in. I've been a part of a couple of these beforehand where somebody's like, oh, let's just get together and work on some stuff. That's great, but it's also a lot easier not to show up for calls when you don't have anything invested. When that's the big thing. And when you write a check, it hurts. It really hurts. It's like, okay, now I'm in, I've got to get value from this, and you just commit. And, so those are the things that are super important. And then the last thing is you need people that are on similar paths. You don't want somebody who is 10 steps ahead of you or somebody who's 10 steps behind you. That does no one any value at all. You want people that are along the same journey or the same path. Those are the things that I think are really, really key. And you're looking for people that are, so you're going to bring your average up. Obviously somebody's going to be the one, the average is the highest, but you want to be around people that'll press you a little bit and make you uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's probably one of the big key value points of a good facilitator too, right? Is understanding which people really need to be in a certain group.
And so that's just spending time putting the right people together, putting those people in a room who will do that. That's honestly, that's 90% of the battle. It's just finding those right people and saying like, okay, you are similar paths. You're going to give value to each other. I know you guys, we get along. And
what are your perspectives on virtual meetings versus in-person meetings?
Yeah. The in-person meetings are vital. You just have to get together and meet each other in person. There's nothing that can change that. They were just human beings. We tried that experiment during COVID. But like you and I don't know how many times you and I talked before we finally met each other in person.
Probably half a dozen times, maybe more.
Probably half a dozen times. But the first time you meet each other in person, it's like, oh, you just take that relationship to another level. But the virtual too is we're all busy, and it's vital. It's vital. I always think about like when I think about like personal growth and development and things like that. Like I think one of the things we really lack in agriculture is that we try to do all of our personal growth in these 3-day seminars in the winter.
We're going to pick one and that's the one we're going to for the year, and it's 3 days, right?
That's right. We go there, we have all these big ideas, 3 days, we hit it hard, we come home, and then we get maybe one thing done. from what I've seen is personal development is if you can just keep that ball just slightly moving ahead, we're busy in agriculture in the summer. I get it. But if you can just keep the momentum going just a little bit. I told a guy the other day, I said, it's like a semi. It's like, you never want to stop a semi. You run up to a stop sign. It's like, you just slowly want to keep creeping. Probably not going to stop that semi in all reality. You just want to keep it slowly going forward in those times when you're really busy. And then when you have those times where you're not so busy, you can kind of open things back up and you can really run. So, that's how I see one of the big mistakes we've made in agriculture is these big events rather than just a slow trickle throughout the year. And the virtual meetings, are that slow trickle.
Well, and that brings up another point too, that I think is very hard to get value out of those, 3-day events, and you come home from that, but there's nobody really to hold you accountable to what you committed to doing when you were at that. Right. So you want to talk a little bit about that aspect of, I know that's one of the big things that I've gotten out of being part of a peer group.
Yeah. I wrote down, what are of peer groups, what are the 3 things that they actually bring, right? People asked me that before, what value do they bring? And my second one is accountability. We can all lie to ourselves pretty easily. We can say we're going to get something done. We can say, hey, by next week, I'm going to make that phone call. But when you tell other people that you're going to do it and you're going to show up on a phone call, like I met with my group 6 a.m. this morning, and I knew they were going to ask me and somebody's going to hold me accountable. They're all the 3 people in my subgroup are all military. They are going to hold me accountable. They're going to ask about it. They're not going to let it slip. And so there's a lot of power in that of just not lying to ourselves. See, we can do that pretty easily. We can't lie to other people. And to find those people around you that say, hey, what's the deal, man? You said you were going to do this the last 2 weeks. What's up?
Well, and it's people that you probably built some good respect with as well. So it's not like it's some guy down the street you don't know. It's somebody that you have mutual respect for, and you don't want to let them down. You don't want them to think less of you because you just don't keep your word.
Right. That's exactly right. And with peer groups too, the third thing I wrote down here is what they really do is they're just a time saver. We're all on this, we're trying to learn as fast as we can. And when we get older, the time we realize gets less, right? So, everybody's learning at a certain rate. And what peer groups do is instead of learning at 5% like everybody else, we learn at 25%. We take the power of the group and we learn that much faster than we would on our own. Because we could. There's nothing in this world that any of us couldn't figure out how to do with enough time. If I gave you, it's like, hey, Paul, I want you to be the best, I want you to be a CPA. In enough time, you could figure it out. You could make enough mistakes and you could do it, or I could start my own dairy. Enough time, I could figure it out. Enough mistakes, but if I can harness the power of other people that have already done it, it's just way faster, way faster.
Matt, another aspect that I would like to get your take on that I've seen value from in peer groups that I've been involved in is a lot of times you see collaboration. I mean, we're kind of collaborating right now today, right? You're on my podcast. So, and I've done business and made investments with other people that I've been in peer groups with because those are people that I built trust with and they had good ideas that I was interested in. So you want to talk a little bit about that aspect, some of the things that you've seen around collaboration inside a peer group?
Yeah. So again, we're collaborating right now. And another individual that we both know, I needed some insight on for a customer of mine and also at a peer group about virtual assistants. And the first person I leaned on was like, who do I know within the group that knows more about hiring virtual assistants than I do? Like, I don't know the first thing about it. I mean, I know the first thing about it, but it's like, who do I know within the group who's excellent at it, knows it, and knows the pitfalls, and works a little closely in agriculture. So those are the people, like, that's where my mind goes right away. Like who, not how. I think probably all read that book, or hopefully everybody has. If not, pick it up. Pick that up. But that's within a group like that, you start asking yourself, like, who can help me with this? And more than likely, I'll speak for myself within our peer group, is that people are more than willing to help you if you are, if you show up and you're giving value to others, it comes back tenfold, and people will help you. They wouldn't help normal people off the streets if they called them unsolicited and just said, "Hey, I need some advice." But there's people within the group I know I can call and say, "I need some help. Would you want to write an article together with me?" Doing that with a person within our group. Would you want to write an article? And it's pretty impactful to have that network out there. And agriculture is inherently, it's an isolated business where we're functioning in rural environments where we don't have, our communities are they're close, but they're pretty local. And it's tough to find somebody that's halfway across the country to collaborate with. So when you find those people, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I think you just brought up another point there, especially in rural communities. I mean, if you're in a big city, it's easy to find people that might have interesting new ideas that fit your value systems and that sort of thing. But in rural America, if you live in a town of 300 people and the next closest town is 35 miles away, there's probably not a real big group of people that you're going to say, those people are going to elevate what I'm trying to do. They're going to bring new ideas. So for me, I know that's been one aspect that's been really neat to see, is basically just broadens your pool of who you can pull ideas from and learn new things from.
Yes. Yeah, you're exactly right. It's and it's even more vital that if you're somebody who's trying to do some different things, it's even a bigger thing where you're not getting, you have some big harebrained ideas and you want to do some things and you have people laughing at you locally, and
never had that happen before.
Yeah. Or people say, like, that's a great idea, man. Like, how can I help you? And excited for you, and like legitimately excited to see you succeed. I had somebody tell me once that when you're going through business, a third of the people won't care about what you're doing, a third want you to succeed, and a third want you to fail. And so you just got to find those third that want you to succeed. That's what we're looking for. So,
what are some of the pitfalls, I guess, that you've seen in peer groups or things to be aware of to make sure that you can head off that might be issues in a peer group?
Yeah, they're the things that, somebody who's just looking to get value all the time is probably the biggest downfall. Of somebody that is within the group that is selfish, trying to take others' time, and never giving back to the group. That's the doesn't show up. Those are the things that just don't work within a group. I'm trying to think of what other things, Paul. I mean, you and I have been both we've been seeing a lot of people. But then those that just, they're not all in.
Yeah. They're not showing up.
They're not showing up, or they do, and they're just there filling that void. I think sometimes it would be better just to not even show up rather than to show up and be a warm body there. That's the things that I see that are, say there. I think being a member of a peer group too, it's not for every season of your life. It's sometimes it's hard to be, sometimes we want to open things up and we're hard charging and we're like, you've got a ton of kids. I know there's points in our life where we can, you got newborn, you got 3 newborns under the age of 5. It's like, man, maybe this isn't the season of life where you can focus on yourself and doing all those things. It might be that time where you're just going to have to just pull back a little bit and survive until you get all those kids out of diapers. So
what are some of the things that you see with peer groups that make them more valuable today with the challenges and the technological changes and the, I guess, mindset shift in our culture today that make peer groups more sought after today than what they have been in the past?
Yeah. I think the one thing that all of us are missing, and I would even say, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say males even more so, is a sense of community. We miss that. We miss that tribal piece. There's things that happen in our society that made it worse. COVID made it worse. Working virtually, those things have all made it worse. So we're all seeking that. It goes back to millions of years ago. That was I've heard people say like we're rooted in that, being members of the tribe or not getting kicked out of the tribe, right? Like that's like our caveman. That was their biggest fear, is being booted out of the tribe. And so when you're going through life on your own, it can be lonely. It can be super lonely. When you have times when you need to lean on others and there's no one around, or you don't know who to lean on, it's a lonely space. And one of the things that I've learned within our group, Paul, and it's a ton of high achievers in the group. When you get down to it, everybody's struggling with something in their life.
They've all got something, right?
They've all got something. You watch these people, you're like, this person's got the world by the tail. And you get down and you get a conversation that's deep and insightful. Man, everybody's struggling with something. I've been part of more than one of these conversations where tears come out and you're like, whew, this is tough. So I don't know what your original question was, but that's what we're seeking. We're seeking community out there. We're looking to others to really be authentic and vulnerable with too, to drop some of this macho guard that we carry along with us and be vulnerable and say, man, I'm scared.
How do you create that environment? Because that's a very unique environment that you don't see in a lot of places, right? I think as the world gets more virtual, and we get more secluded, we are more fearful of being authentic. Yeah. Even with ourselves to some extent, but especially in a group. So how do you create that?
That's a great question, Paul. I don't know if first of all, I think you have to have people that want to go there too, that'll open up and have a safe space around you. Oftentimes it just takes time around each other before you'll feel like you can do that with one another and say like, man, I'm really struggling. But it's a start for sure, to have somebody you can at least get more vulnerable within a group that, is not going to be judgmental on you. Not going to say like, hey man, or even if you, so I lived in a small town, like I knew I couldn't be vulnerable with people. Friends that I had, who knows, like they might get, you tell them you have some mental illness problems, like you're struggling with depression. Like, good grief, are they going to repeat this to my banker? Are they going to repeat this to, on and on and on? And it just creates even more isolated atmosphere. So I don't know if I have any answers to it, but when you do find those people that you can drop guards, or you watch others be completely vulnerable for the first time and say, like, it's pretty powerful. It's
that really opened my eyes when I saw that, somebody that in our group that, just very, very wealthy, had a great business, looked like they had phenomenal marriage and relationships. And then you find out that their wife's talking about leaving them.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, wow. He's bringing this up because he's looking for a solution and he needs help. And we were able to give him help him think a little bit more clearly through a clouded situation. And, and he's still together with his wife. So I think, but that was a very eye-opening experience to me, is to see somebody that, you thought had it that together, because they were, so Mr. Successful, and they needed help just like I needed help on something else. Right. So
that's exactly right. Yep. So that's, I know you're a spiritual person. Like, I think it's great to be there for others in their time of need when they're, that's a lot of times where you get in those conversations. It's like, I was meant to be here at this time to help this person on what they need. And so that's,
it's a pretty special thing.
It feels good. Pretty special. You're right. Like, exactly right.
So anything else in peer groups that you can think of that we should touch on, or what you're looking to do in the future here? Yeah.
So the one thing I'm building right now is a group of, one of the things that I just see in the groups that I work with is that the struggle that everybody's having in agriculture, and there's, we're talking about things like mass deportations now, tariffs. One of the, I would say the major struggle that I've had is labor issues across every bit of agriculture. Everybody is struggling with labor issues, and they're struggling with time. So I'm putting together a group right now to basically to look on how to alleviate nothing more on the farm, but try to build in more time in their schedule, and how to alleviate some of their labor constraints that they have on the farm, ranch, dairy, you name it. Those are the things that are hindering growth right now. And so, I'm leaning on groups. There's really four pillars to that. Two of them I understand really, really well. One's leveraging H-2A workers, foreign labor. Still, it's been around. I've got a friend of mine that's been doing it over 20 years, but still people don't understand it.
Right.
How to better manage our own employees, how to be better managers ourselves, how to hold employees accountable. Like, it's a skill you have to learn. We just aren't born as inherently good managers. But the two things that I'm exploring within my group are how we better leverage virtual assistants in agriculture. It's a wild space, and other businesses have been utilizing it for years. And then the last piece is really AI, and how we utilize that to help us in our decision-making process and speed up our decision-making process. So that's if we're not looking at those two things, I know AI is. I saw you had somebody on here earlier talking about AI, but it's pretty powerful tool. I think it'll save us an immense amount of time when we're trying to make strategic business decisions on our farms and ranches.
Agreed. I think there's a lot of places that can go. So, well, Matt, before we sign off here, how can people get a hold of you and touch base with you find out maybe a little bit more about a peer group that you're putting together, or just to connect with you?
Yeah. So the best way to find me, I'm on pretty much all the platforms, but send me an email at hello@mattbose.com, or I have a website, www.mattbose.com. But yeah, love to hear from you. Bounce ideas around and help bring a little bit more positivity to this space.
Great. Well, I really appreciate being on here today, Matt, and having this conversation about peer groups. I think it's one that can benefit a lot of people in agriculture, especially if they're owning their own business. So thanks again for being here.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
Well, once again, thank you for listening to the AgCulture Podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode and got something out of it, please share it with somebody that you know that would also find value in this episode. And don't forget to connect with Matt. His links are in our show notes, so check those out. And as always, if you'd be so kind to leave a rating and review, we really appreciate it. That helps grow our audience. We only do this by word of mouth. That's how we grow. So you helping us out there, spreading this and giving us a rating and review really make a big difference in how we can add value to others. Again, I'm Paul Windemaller, and this has been the AgCulture Podcast. Look forward to seeing you next week for another exciting episode.